Hello, everybody. In this video, I wanted to talk about how I think everybody has a story, and this is because the impersonal aspect of life sometimes, not sometimes, it actually always happens like this. It makes us forget that like people are humans, right? And I thought just that phenomenon is kind of interesting. How you can be out in public, like you find out that like 100 people died in some accident in some country, and you're like, like whatever, like so sad, thoughts and prayers, whatever. But you don't really care, right? Because you're like, whatever. But if all of a sudden you knew that the first person's name was Tim, who was an accountant, had a wife and 2 kids, his dream was to be a musician, and then victim number two, or the person number two that died, her name was Mary, and she was a dentist, and her dream was to buy a house for her parents, and she was pregnant with a kid, or all of a sudden, like those notions, like knowing those things somehow like humanizes people, right? And this idea of everybody has a story, I forgot where I heard it recently, but I heard about it and it just kind of clicked right in my head. Like I was like, okay, that is true. Like you can take some random person off the street, like just this random NPC, like they say, like some random person, and that's the impersonal side of it. Like you don't know them, so to you they don't matter. But if all of a sudden they start talking to you, you start listening to them, they start telling you about their life, right? Where they came from, where they were born, how they got here, the different situations they've been in, the different places they've been in, the different jobs they had, the different schools they went to, the different situations that they faced, the different problems that they had. Like if all of a sudden they start doing that, you inevitably start to care about them, right? To the point that they actually matter, right? You don't love them, but you do care about them, right? To the point that it's like, oh, hey, like I know this person, right? Her name, his name is, I know they did this, I know they were here, I know they experienced these things, right? And I think that's something that's so like interesting, how we can all have a story we can tell people, right? Like and stories, they say, are very like attention grabbing, right? Like if you start telling a story to someone or to a group of people, they're gonna listen, right? That's pretty interesting for people. It's actually one of the ways, like they say, how to start a conversation, no, how to start a presentation. You can state a fact, you can like read or say a quote, you can state a statistic, they say, like a percentage. A lot of presentations, like I'm going to talk about gun violence, so 87% of murders are done by gun violence or whatever, right? So it's like you grab people's attention. A rhetorical question, or you can maybe start off with an anecdote, with a story, right? Like a lot of TED Talks start like that, like, they get out there and then they say, when I was 8 years old, my father would take me to, and then like all of a sudden, like people are paying attention, right? Like people want to know what the story is about and how it ends, right? What happens, the reasons for things, right? They want to listen to people. So, if you start off with like, oh yeah, like I grew up, I was born in this place and I grew up here, and then I went to school here, and then I had these type of friends, and then my teenage years were like this, and then this happened, and then and that gets people like interested, so that could be something that you could also use to not manipulate, but like in a way, like consciously, with effort, connect with people, right? Like make a conscious connection, because a lot of people have this as like a natural ability. They're just socially skilled, right? Communication wise, they're able to talk about themselves, they're able to ask the right questions, they're able to establish the right rapport with other people. But other people aren't really good at that, or they don't really have practice in that. So for those kind of people, it would be good to start off with like sharing your story, right? Or listening to other people's stories, because that also humanizes people. I think about like the school shooters, or like Dylan and Eric, from Columbine, that would talk about like the jocks that would bully them and things like that. And like right now I'm thinking, what if they just sat down one day and they just listened to each other. They just told each other stories, and not the bad, because a lot of people romanticize the bad, right? Like, oh yeah, like, my traumatic experience, and it's like, oh man, like that's so sad. And it's like, no, like you can talk about the bad and the good, right? Or just about anything, you know? If you were to sit people down that were having conflicts and listen to them, because when you listen to them, you understand them, because we're all humans. Like, what if you put Russians and Ukrainians in the same spot? Like some people do that, and I forgot the YouTube channel that does that, but you can look it up, like Jewish people with Palestinian people like talking, and then like they don't see eye to eye, but at least they don't see each other as like this impersonal NPC that needs to be taken out, right? Like, you listen to their story because everybody has a story, right? And then you start to listen to, you hear them out, right? Like where they came from, how they have lived their life, and then you also talk about your life, your story, which is cathartic, right? Because it makes you feel good to talk, right? It releases endorphins, all this stuff. So I think that's something to take into consideration. Not a lot of us have time for this, obviously, I know that. And I just think it's interesting how people are able to hate other people until you hear their stories, right? Until you share, like, what your life has been about, what their life has been about. Until you hear these things, it's like you're able to hate them, right? Like, think of the Nazis, right? You're able to just kill them. Like, I wonder what would have happened if, like, the Jewish people would have spoken to the Nazis about their life, and then they would have listened to the Nazis about their life, and then there would have, it's just like food for thought, right? Like, it's so idealistic, I know, but just food for thought. And there was this thing where, like, I've seen it in movies and series where they say even knowing people's names humanizes the person, right? So some people will say, like, let's say in a movie, some killer's killing people, and then this person's like, the person doesn't want to die, and the person starts saying, my name is Fred, and I'm an accountant, and I have 3 kids and a wife, and I like to go fishing on Sundays, and I like to, and it's like the killer's now going to have a harder time killing them, right? If they were already doubtful, they're going to have a harder time, because now they have like human information on that person, right? It's no longer just anybody, right? Now it's Fred, an accountant, with, so I feel like that's also like knowing people's names. And maybe that's why, more than just a greeting or a way to start a conversation, when people meet, they say, what's your name? My name's this, and my name is this, right? And you introduce yourselves. I think more than anything, it's also not more than anything, but I think a part of it is to humanize people, right? To kind of like, and it's so weird how that works, right? Because it's just information, it's just data, right? Like, me knowing your name, where you were born, how many kids you have, like your wife's name, your husband's name, whatever. Me knowing that information are just cold hard data. It's just facts, right? So it's not really the left side of the brain that's working, like, this is the data, like this machinery operates on 400 volts of power, of watt power. No, like, it's not only that, like, list of data, of information, but it's this like right hemisphere imaginative aspect that makes us imagine that person's life, right? Like, oh, you're a Fred, like, what's a Fred like? You're an accountant, what's an accountant like? You probably have an office, you have 3 kids. Oh, you probably, like, wake up to make them pancakes on Saturday or whatever, right? So you start imagining these things, and those are the things that get you to the emotional, right? So yeah, I just thought I'd talk about this. Like, I think it's very interesting how everybody has a story. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.